Welcome to meeting 125 of the House of Commons of the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights. Bienvenue à nos réunions. Pursuant to Standing Order 108, Sub 2, and the motion adopted on December 2, 2024, committee's meeting in public to begin its study of the subject matter of Bill C-63, an act to enact the Online Harms Act, to amend the Criminal Code, the Canadian Human Rights Act, and Act respecting mandatory reporting of Internet child pornography by persons who provide an Internet service, and to make consequential and related amendments to other acts. Alors, avant d'accueillir...
Before we welcome our witnesses, I would bring your attention the presence of a special guest at our Parliament. Madame Sokmoni Kong. She is the Cambodian branch of Assemblée parlementaire de la Francophonie Secretary. She was selected by the Association of Secretary Generals of Francophone Parliaments, rewarding her valued work at her institution. She has chosen the Parliament of Canada to have this 2-week advanced internship. We wish you a successful stay in Canada, Madame Kong.
And I will say, as a previous chargé de mission qui représentait l'Amérique,
I would like to tell you that I'm very excited that you have chosen Canada, so welcome.
Our witnesses for the first hour. They are all appearing by video conferences. And before I say their names, I'm just going to a few reminders, and I'm going to ask colleagues in the room or by video conference to please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking, and ensure that you address your questions through the chair, and please do not take the floor until after you are recognized. For our witnesses participating by video conference, please ensure you have selected on the bottom of your screen, I know you have because I heard the clerk prior to explaining, the language of your choice. Et je veux aussi dire que tous les...
I also want to say that all witnesses that are with us this morning have been tested for sound, and everything works fine.
Them to you, and I will ask each to give their opening remarks for up to 5 minutes. And as the chair, I just want to make note of the fact that it is my responsibility, with the help of the clerk, to keep time as best as we can to allow fairness for both the witnesses but also the members in the room asking questions, and also to suspend for a minute in order to allow 1 hour for second panelists to also be brought in. So with us this morning is from Amanda Todd Legacy Society, Madame Carol Todd, fondatrice et mère.
Founder and mother. From the Canadian Centre for Child Protection, we have Liana MacDonald, Directrice Générale.
Madame Barley Lavers, who are participating together. So now I will ask Madame Todd to please begin with your opening comments.
Okay, can you hear me? Good morning. I'm speaking to you from Vancouver, British Columbia, and I thank you for this invitation to participate in this pre-study session on Bill C-63. To start, the majority of what I'm going to say in the next 5 minutes or the question answer are my thoughts and my thoughts only. Today, I must stress the importance of Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act. This bill is a comprehensive approach to addressing the growing concerns of harmful content on the internet. Online safety, I feel, is a shared responsibility, and everyone, users, parents, educators, and platforms play a role in creating a safer online world by ensuring protection, accountability, and support. My name is Carol Todd. I'm widely known as the mother of Amanda Todd. I am a teacher educator in British Columbia with my work primarily centered on the education of digital literacy, online safety, and child abuse prevention, namely exploitation and sextortion. Providing children, teachers, and families with the knowledge and skills to navigate the digital world is essential and is one of the reasons why I created a legacy, a nonprofit in Amanda's memory. My daughter, Amanda Todd, was a Canadian teenager whose tragic story brought international attention to the severe impacts of cyberbullying, online harassment, and exploitation. She was born in November of 1996, and Amanda faced relentless harassment both online and offline as a young teenager. She ultimately took her life on October of 2012, and knowingly, parents shouldn't outlive their children in preventable situations. Amanda's ordeal began when she was 12 years old. She was persuaded by an online stranger to expose her breasts on a webcam. This individual saved the image and later used it to blackmail her, threatening to share the photos with her friends and family if she didn't perform more explicit acts. Despite changing schools multiple times, Amanda couldn't escape the harassment, and the blackmailer continued to follow her for 2.5 years, creating fake profiles to spread the image and further humiliate her. In September of 2012, 5 weeks before Amanda took her own life, Amanda posted a YouTube video entitled My Story, Struggling, Bullying, Suicide, and Self-Harm, where she flashed flashcards to share her painful experiences. She detailed the bullying, physical assaults, and severe emotional distress she endured, both online and offline. The video went viral after her death and it's been viewed about 50 million times across the world. Amanda's death prompted significant public and governmental responses. In 2022, Aidan Caban, a Dutch man, was convicted of harassing and extorting Amanda in a Canadian court and was sentenced to 13 Canadian years in prison. He is currently serving his Canadian time in the Netherlands. Amanda's story continues to resonate, highlighting the urgent need for stronger protections against online harassment and better supports for victims of bullying and cyberbullying and exploitation. There are so many voices that remain unheard, either due to fear, judgment, or shame, or because they can no longer speak. It is vital to let these silent voices be heard and create a more compassionate and understanding world where we help and not hurt. Over the past decade, we have observed rapid changes in technology. We have watched devices that were used for communication and as a useful tool turn into fun devices that can exploit and hurt others. Since its inception, the internet has taken on darker tones. The word algorithms is now in our vocabulary where it once never was. Research has highlighted some of the harmful effects related to screen time. These effects include reduced well-being, mood disorders, depression, and anxiety. These effects impact children and adults alike in a world filled with online media. With increased access to the internet, there comes easier access to violent and explicit online content, which can impact sexual attitudes and behaviors, harm to children through the creation, sharing, and viewing of sexual abuse material, and increased violence against women and girls, as well as sex trafficking. Governments must take action to enact new laws and modify existing ones. To make the online world safer, we must increase education and awareness. We must have stronger regulations and laws like Bill C-63. We have to improve the behaviors of the online platforms. We need parental controls and monitoring, and we need to encourage reporting like cybertips.ca. Bill C-63
Mrs. Todd, we will come back to you. No, it's okay. We'll come back to you with the questions because I think our members will probably want to flush those out as well. And I neglected to ask, and I know when people are on the screen, they're not paying attention, but I'll do my best to put 30 seconds and to put time is up, so not to interrupt. I will now move on to Madame McDonald, please, for up to 5 minutes.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much to the committee for this opportunity. My name is Leanna McDonald, and I am the Executive Director of the Canadian Centre for Child Protection, a registered charity that has been operating for nearly 40 years to protect Canadian children. Again, thanks for the opportunity. For the past 22 years, we have been operating cybertip.ca, which is Canada's national tip line to report online crimes against children. In 2017, we launched Project Arachnid, an innovative online platform that targets the removal of child sexual abuse material at scale. It is through this critical work that we have witnessed firsthand and all too often the colossal injury and harm that happens every single day to children online. The unregulated internet has basically destroyed childhood as we have historically known it, while children and families are paying a devastating price for the ongoing failure of government to regulate online spaces. There has been a steady increase in the number and seriousness of online crimes against children since the rise of social media, which created the perfect storm of injury and harm to children. We saw another huge and significant jump after 2020 with COVID. These are key events that have exacerbated and intensified harm to our children. We've handed children technology that has been weaponized against them by predators and technology services. To underscore what I'm talking about, every month through CyberTip, the tip line, we process over 2,500 reports. And these are reports where Canadians know to come into us. We've seen a 760% increase in luring reports since the start of COVID in 2020. We've managed more than 4,300 requests from youth and their caregivers in the last year alone. We receive approximately 7 sextortion reports every single day at the tip line. And we've processed close to 4,000 sexually explicit deepfake images and videos of children. And finally, since 2017, we've issued over 40 million takedown notices to companies to take down child sexual abuse material. There is no other entity in Canada that is doing the work we are doing. And regrettably, and in a very difficult way, we are witnessing firsthand the scale of harm that is happening for our children and how it has evolved over the years. We are dealing with young people who are terrified about what an offender will force them to do next. Youth who are frantically trying to get their child's sexual material down. Families who are dealing with situations that have escalated well beyond anything that they ever could have imagined. We are supporting survivors of child sexual abuse material from all over the world. Their abusive imagery is endlessly uploaded and re-uploaded on platforms available with anyone with an internet connection. These victims and children have been stripped away of their privacy, their dignity, and in fact, they have no recourse. Their rights are repeatedly violated while the predators who obsess over them, the ones who stalk, harass, and target them, are shielded by the cloak of anonymity that technology affords them. To try and deal with this mess through Project Arachnid, we are issuing between 10 and 20,000 notices to companies every single day. These notices are overwhelmingly for known child sexual abuse material. And by that, I mean imagery that has been circulating for years, tormenting survivors, and yet still these platforms get to choose whether or not they take it down. They get to regulate themselves. They get to decide all on their own what is okay and what is not okay. It's outrageous, and it must change. To put this all into perspective for you quickly as I close, here's a sampling of the actual interventions that our organization deals with every day. Imagine, and this is happening, a young girl between the ages of 11 and 12 who is being tortured daily by a group of anonymous men. Every day she is ordered to go into the school bathroom and instructed to self-abuse and harm while recording the material. She is paralyzed by fear. She does as she's told. The requests get worse, more degrading, more harmful. Eventually she reaches out for help. A teenage boy tricked into sending a sexual image to a person he thought was a peer. But that person turns on him and threatens to send the images to all his friends and families. He is shocked, he's terrified. He believes with every bone in his body that they will do what they've said. He pays them. It's not enough. The threats keep coming. He is desperate to make it stop. These are just a few of the examples that we hear.
Thank
They
you,
are
Ms.
not
McDonald.
hypotheticals.
We'll get back with questions. Thank you. I'm now going to ask Madame Lavers to please commence your 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting my husband and I to speak today. We want to introduce our son to you today. Pardon me. Harry was very outgoing, an inclusive young man, intelligent, handsome. He was an athlete, a brother, and loved by his friends and his community. Harry was a patriot. He loved his country. He joined the cadets at age 14. And then in grade 11, the fall of 2022, Harry joined the Prince Edward Island Regiment. He was 16. He was doing his basic training in Summerside on Prince Edward Island on the weekends while going to Surrey Regional School full-time. He only had 1 weekend left to complete his basic training for the RCAC. He was so proud of Canada and planned to dedicate his life to serving his country. So I'm Barbie Lavers, and my husband is Carl Burke, and we are Harry's parents. Harry was 17 years old when we lost him to sextortion. As a family, we had many conversations with Harry and his sister Ella about safe online use and the dangers of sharing images online. Unfortunately, our family was not aware of the word sextortion. We had never heard of it. On the 24th of April, Harry came to his dad and told him that he had screwed up. He had shared intimate pictures with a girl, supposedly his own age, from Nova Scotia. This individual was now demanding money, or they would share Harry's images with all of his contacts, and in particular his commanding officer in the RCAC. Sadly, this individual did share some of the images with his friends and cadets, and Harry knew this. I was also contacted on Instagram by apparently the same individual who told me they would ruin his life. When Harry came to us that evening and told us what had happened, all four of us sat at the table and talked about it and made a plan to contact the local RCMP in the morning. We thought Harry was comfortable with this plan, but sadly he wasn't. On the morning of April 23rd, we were getting ready for our day. My husband went down to check on Harry, and the sheets in his bed had been pulled back, but the bed had not been slept in. He yelled for me, "Where is Harry?" I came running down the stairs. By this time, Carl was in the garage, and he found Harry face down on the floor. He had shot himself. What I'm telling you here does not define or demonstrate in any way what we found, what we felt, or how our family felt, and how our lives have been changed forever. Just 2 weeks ago, 2 teen boys and a young man on PEI were targeted for the underreported global crime of sextortion. The boys were targeted on social media platforms where the strangers posed as age-appropriate girls for sex photo swaps. This has to be stopped. We as a family support Bill C-63 to protect our children. As advancements continue with technology and access to devices continue, the risk to our children increases. We must work together as communities, families, governments to reduce the online abuse of our children through user regulations and accountability that will provide support to all of us. Social media platforms must be held accountable. They must incorporate regulations to keep our children safe. Children like our Harry are dying. The evidence of harm to our children is abundantly apparent. Our 17-year-old daughter, Ella, has a Facebook account, and she is unable to access Marketplace on Facebook because she is under 18. If you or I are on Marketplace, occasionally you'll get a pop-up that says this seller might not be for your country, from your country. So obviously Facebook has the ability to review IP addresses from incoming messages to their system. Can we not use this for our children's safety? Now is not the time to enact or dramatize politics. Colors not need matter in this discussion. Our children are the most important issue here, not colors. This bill provides an opportunity to protect our children and show political coalition. Our children are in crisis. Some could say they're even at war. It is not time for our children to be used as political pawns to show one party is more correct than the other. A temporary alliance, it must and is required to save our children. The longer Bill C-63 remains a political issue, the more children we will lose. We beg you to please stop wasting time and do something to help save our children.
Thank you.
Our children are...
Thank you, Mrs. Lavers. We're now going to begin. So what we do now is we do a first round with 4 parliamentarians, and I give them 6 minutes each for questions and responses from each of you. And we will commence with Ms. Rempel-Garner, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for your courage and for your advocacy. I'll start by saying that this issue has been one that's been near and dear to my heart for many years. I've had people very close to me who have had their lives completely upended and upset by a lack of action and tools for preventing online harassment. So my first question will be this. Do you share the sentiment with me that we shouldn't be waiting 2 or 3 years to have action to protect Canadians, particularly children, online? And I'll start with Ms. Todd, just a yes or no.
Yes, we shouldn't be waiting.
Be waiting. Would you also share with me concern that online platforms have been able to dictate the terms of this discussion, that they've been able to sort of wiggle through really tough regulatory restrictions that could have prevented a lot of what we heard here today? Do you get that sentiment that sometimes these platforms have the upper hand? Ms. Todd?
Yes, these platforms are based on money-making businesses and haven't thought about the safety online of children and adults. We know that because in the last 12 years since I've been focusing on this, we've seen changes. And just recently, 6 months ago, Meta has changed the algorithms for
Thank you.
Safety. They could have done this before.
So I'm with you on that. So then, based on your 2 answers to that, would you support would you recommend to us that we should say that the responsibility for setting out rules for these platforms be punted down the road 2 years and put into a regulatory body that that has the ability, like these platforms would have the ability behind closed doors and without public scrutiny to set what those rules are? That doesn't sound like a good approach to me. What do you think? Ms. Todd?
I've read up on what Australia has done with e-commissioner and what the UK and or what Australia has done. And in my feeling, I believe that having a regulatory board like an e-commission would be a good idea. Unfortunately, it does take a long time for it to develop. And but down the road,
what if we could have our cake and eat it too? What if Parliament today legislated a duty of care for online platforms and said, you have to do this, this is illegal, and then sent that to a regulator? So starting like today, that there was a legislated duty of care for online operators to do everything that every other witness has talked about here today. Do you think that that is maybe a better approach?
If you could describe to me what the duty of care and who the regulator might be, then it's a possibility, but everything's got to be laid out and
I need to
up well.
interrupt for a moment. I'm told by the members that the bells are ringing. I'm sorry, folks, but I'm going to have to ask, can we have unanimous consent, please, to continue? I'm assuming if the bells are ringing, we have 30 minutes, but I could be wrong. Can somebody please check? The clerk is checking. But are they ringing, the vote is in 10 minutes, or are they ringing?
But that could change in a heartbeat. No. Yeah, let's keep going.
Yeah.
Let's keep going.
That's right. So I think oh my goodness. I think we're all in agreement. I think I'm asking for unanimous consent, and I think everybody's in agreeing that we will continue to go with this, but we have to stop 5 minutes before the vote. So please continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm sorry, Ms. Todd. It was your turn to respond.
Thank you. So, Ms. Todd, you just asked me if I could show you that approach, and I can. There's a bill in front of Parliament right now called Bill C-412, and it outlines a specific duty of care for online operators that says exactly what they have to do in this. And it also specifies the regulatory body. And if it was passed today, it could be enacted today, and we could have immediate impacts. That's my concern with C-63, is that it takes this responsibility and it puts it into a regulator that hasn't been built, and it gives online platforms the ability to wiggle out of this 2, 3, 4 years in the future. And my concern is how many more kids are going to experience this and have detrimental impacts. So I would direct your attention to C-412, but with the time I have left, I'd like to just ask some questions on if you think some high-level things that are in there, if you think that would be a good approach. First of all, the immediate updating of Canada's non-consensual distribution of intimate image laws to include images created by artificial intelligence, otherwise known as deep nudes. Do you think we need to do that today, Ms.
Yes.
Todd? Do you realize that C-63 does not do that?
It was my understanding that there was embedded in C-63 something about AI, but
It doesn't. It punts it to a regulator, and it doesn't update the criminal code. C-412 does. Do you also think that duty of care, which is in C-412, which includes things like other witnesses said about being able to discern who are minors and having specific actions on what online operators have to do to prevent the instances, do you think that is something that we should be looking at today?
yes, I do.
So just to be clear, your position is that we should not be necessarily punting this to a regulator and having action 2 to 3 years in the future, but that we should be looking for action today through a prescribed duty of care.
Quick response if there is one. If not, yes?
If, as I said, we realize that creating a digital safety commission in Canada takes a while. My dream would be that in the meantime, when this is built, that there'd be something in place that could regulate also.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. Let me now move, and I'm going to try and be fair. If I do the math, if I can go 6, 6, and 6, that'll give me enough time then to stop before bells. So, Mr. Maloney, you have up to 6 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank you and members around the table for allowing us to do this study, particularly those who voted in favor of proceeding with it. And I do want to thank the witnesses for their powerful and important presentations today. But I just want to highlight so that everybody knows, and I think everybody is aware, that the minister announced yesterday that we intend to split Bill C-63 into 2 parts, with the digital safety and child protection measures separated from the measures that focus on hate. And I'd like to get on record that we've agreed to start with a pre-study of 3 meetings, but I believe we should continue with 3 to 6 meetings on Part 1 of the bill. This means a focus on the Online Harms Act and the amendments to the Mandatory Reporting Act, and then we can proceed with a second study on the balance of the bill at a later date. I do have questions for the witnesses, and I just want to emphasize our gratitude to all of you for being here, because we know this is incredibly difficult to share your stories in this fashion or in any other fashion, but so you have our gratitude and respect. Child sexual abuse in Canada now is currently illegal. Law enforcement can and should deal with horrible content, as Ms. Rempel was saying. But Ms. Lavers, as you said, we need to depoliticize this. And the criminal code amendments alone are not enough. What Bill C-63 does, and just to be clear, a number of the issues that Ms. Rempel-Garner was referring to are included in Bill C-63. So I think people need to understand that. But my question to all of you is, if we were to proceed with just the criminal code measures alone without the digital safety framework, would that be enough to address the problems we're talking about today, in your opinion? And I put the question to all of you.
Can I jump in on that one, please? Thank you for that question. And this is really important that we underscore this point. While criminal law is absolutely essential, it is not enough when we're dealing with the upload of material and content online. What we know is, of course, we need to be able to convict, charge people, move down that process. But by the time an image gets uploaded, it can be distributed to multiple platforms at a rate that is just unmanageable. The fact that we have some of the strongest legislation in the world tied to even how we define child sexual abuse material, and we are still issuing between 10 and 20,000 notices a day, really shows that gap. So while certainly, as mentioned, those things are important, what we know when we're dealing with online content and harmful content, we cannot rely exclusively on criminal law.
Do any other witnesses want to comment on that before I move on? No? Okay. Well, Ms. McDonald, I'll go back to you then. I mean, the 10 to 20,000 number that you've mentioned a couple times is quite stark. Without the takedown provisions that are part of C-63, or let me put it another way. With the takedown provisions that are included in Bill C-63, how would the outcomes be different? What would the time frame difference look like, in your opinion, based on the companies having free reign to make the decision now versus the provisions of Bill C-63?
What I would say is a few things there. First off, and I know this will sound odd, but the 24-hour timeline we feel still too long. We know this because we can see companies removing material within minutes. What I would say is that the fact of the matter is that right now there is no accountability, there is no oversight. So we are allowing companies to decide whether or not they are going to agree, whether they want to comply, whether they're going to ignore. There's no accountability. So obviously we need regulation. Obviously we need an accountability structure. And there needs to be consequences to these companies. I will also note that the level of recidivism that we see, and what I mean by that is when we have issued a notice to a company about a particular image, we'll see that same image reappear on that same platform. There's absolutely no excuse for that. So there is no incentive and there's no accountability, and this is why they do what they want.
I'm curious, these 10 to 20,000 notices, what's the response rate? Like what percentage of the notices you send actually generate a response, and how many of those responses generate a response that you're satisfied with?
So actually, over the course now of the few years we've been doing this, and I guess it's because of a little bit of the reputation of the organization and what we do, is that we're seeing about 75% of the material coming down within 2 days. I think that's roughly correct. So we are seeing that, but then we're seeing other providers and bad actors that in fact just ignore our notices. So again, they just decide that they're not going to respond. And again, this is where we need to see governments around the world uniting and calling to account these digital titans that have been allowed to do what they want without any consequence.
Okay, I believe my time is nearly up, so I'll just say thank you again to you and all the other witnesses for being here today.
Thank you, MP Maloney. Maintenant, la parole à député Fortin, s'il vous plaît, pour 6.
Now, MP Fortin, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you to all the witnesses who are here with us today, and especially thank you, Ms. Todd and Ms. Lavers. your evidence is really disturbing. We don't realize the effect, the impact of the social media on our children. And I think it's our duty as legislators to focus on this issue and to find the most appropriate solutions. And hearing you, I know it's difficult for you to relate these stories. It's really one of the saddest stories, and I thank you for your courage to have come and appear before our committee today. That being said, I think Ms. Todd was interrupted. Well, it wasn't anyone's fault. The time had lapsed. So, Ms. Todd, I'd like to give you 1 or 2 minutes to complete your evidence, if you wish.
Thank you for allowing me to do this. I'll continue about why I feel that Bill C-63 is important. I also want to say that we aren't the only country that has afforded this. The UK has an Online Safety Act that was established and written into law in 2023, and Australia has the Online Safety Act put into law in 2021, and the EU has the Online Harms Act, which is similar to what Canada is doing. And Canada has been in collaboration with the UK, Australia, and the EU regarding Bill C-63. Why is this important? It's important because it protects children. And what I don't understand, and this is from my own thinking, is that all the people that are negating on Bill C-63 and saying it's not about children, it's not about protection, and focused on the parts that Minister Virani has said that he and his cabinet would rewrite. It is about protecting children. It's about protecting children and families in the online behaviors of others. And we can't do this without the tech companies' help. And it's really important that we understand this. There are so many people that don't understand this. And I read the negative comments. And personally, it just infuriates me because my daughter died 12 years ago. And I've waited 12 years for this to happen. And for parliamentarians and the political aspects about arguing about this isn't necessary, it just hurts me. It hurts me as a Canadian. We need accountability and transparency. We need to support the victims. And passing Bill C-63 is not just about regulation. It's about taking a stand for the safety and dignity of all Canadians. This is about ensuring that our digital spaces are as safe and respectful as our physical ones. By supporting this bill, we are committing to a future where the internet is a place of opportunity and connection, free from threats of harm and exploitation. Passing Bill C-63 would demonstrate the federal government's commitment to adapting to the digital age and ensuring that the internet remains a safe space for all users. It balances the need for free expression with the imperative to protect individuals from harm, making it necessary and timely piece of legislation. It's also essential to recognize the collective effort in creating platforms that address the challenges faced by children, women, and men. We've come to realize that what happened to Amanda could happen to anyone. As Amanda herself said, everyone has a story. When these stories emerge and they belong to your child, your relatives, and your grandchildren, they carry more weight. No one is immune to becoming a statistic. And as I have previously shared, I have waited 12 years for this because on day one of Amanda's death, I knew that things needed to change in terms of law, legislation, and online safety. I can't bring my child back, but we can certainly keep other children safe. Thank you for this time.
Merci, Madame Todd. Madame Lavers.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. Ms. Lavers, I don't know if you had something to add. I think you must have had maybe I have 1 minute left, so I will give it to you if you have anything to add.
I think what I would like to say is that our children are so precious. And I would ask you as a committee to go home and hug your children, your nieces, your nephews, your grandchildren, and just think about what Carol and I and so many other parents have had to endure because of the unsafe social media platforms. So just take that home with you and really think about it, because Harry and Amanda could still be here with us if this conversation wasn't necessary.
Merci, à
Merci.
tous et on va penser à Harry.
Thank you to all of you, and we'll think of Harry and Amanda in this committee. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Fortin.
Conclude with Mr. McGregor, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I'd like to echo colleagues in thanking witnesses for joining our committee and helping us wade through a very difficult subject. I'm a father of 3 daughters. I have 12-year-old twins, so we are dealing with that as parents on them getting access to the internet and the challenges of finding ways to allow them to do that safely. So, Ms. Todd and Ms. Lavers, I'd like to start with you, because part of the debate on the subject of C-63 has been on whether we should just modernize existing laws and changes to the criminal code, or whether we should add another layer of bureaucracy. I guess, briefly, both of you, if you could just tell us, when you had your experiences in reporting this to the police and when the police were trying to make use of existing criminal code provisions to solve this for both of your children, can you just talk about maybe some of the limitations you experienced with that, and just help us illustrate why you think more is needed based on your personal experiences?
Do you want to go first, Barbie?
Sure. Thanks, Carol. For our experience, the RCMP actually worked with the FBI in the United States, but tracking down the IP address for who had contacted Harry was difficult. And then when they did track it down, it was basically to a call center type of setup, and people work there to extort and sextort and this is their job, just as if they were working at Bell Alliance and taking calls. But they're calling out, and they search for people. Anyway, I don't think just having the criminal code is enough, like Leanne said. I think there has to be stronger guidelines, regulations that in order to hold these companies accountable, because they could do it now if they want. They have the ability. I have no doubt in my mind they do, but they don't want to do it because they use the algorithms that they have to make money, not using the algorithms to keep people safe.
Thank you. I just want to make sure Ms. Todd can get on, because I also want to direct a question to Ms. McDonald after that. So please go ahead, Ms. Todd.
My thinking as a teacher educator also, and I speak to parents and teachers and communities, there's an aspect of prevention, intervention, and reaction. And legislation becomes the reactionary phase of something's happened and what are we going to do next? And so we need more prevention and intervention. And so when I first had to report when this was happening to Amanda, and I had reported it to our local RCMP, it was a very challenging and difficult situation. You have to think that, all this started 14 years ago, 2 years prior to her death. And it came back to me as we can't find the IP address coming out of the States. It's under a VPN. We can't find anything. This is when she was alive. After she died, through investigation in the Netherlands and the UK, they found an IP address for a fellow who was victimizing other young girls, and this happened to be Amanda's predator. And through finding information through Facebook, Amanda's name popped up as her Facebook, the number, the account that she had, and ultimately the Dutch police contacted the Canadian RCMP, and that's how Amanda's predator got caught. There needs to be, things have changed in the last 12 years, and I understand that, but there needs to be more incentive for law enforcement to take on these cases.
Thank you.
Not all cases will go to court, but
Thank you very much for that. And just because I'm running out of time, I would like to get to you, Ms. McDonald. So on your website, you have your organization has a statement stating that the exclusion of private messaging features leaves a substantial threat to children unaddressed. Now, I'm curious about like how we approach this, because there, of course, are great privacy concerns in place. Now, as parents, our 12-year-olds are using children's messenger, so we have full control over their contact list. And in fact, the parents of their friends also have full control. So there's a lot of oversight that we have. So in what ways would you like the law to be crafted to address what you think is a glaring omission in this bill, while still respecting the very real privacy concerns that have been raised with the potential of such an approach?
So,
Thank you very much.
brief
for that
response if possible. 40 seconds left.
question. Okay, just to make the point clear, yes, we are concerned that private messaging is not brought in scope. I think the concern is we see many of these organized crime groups that are targeting Canadian children in their own homes and bedrooms are basically moving over to these types of applications. So our organization has produced a paper on our site that outlines how we can do this by capturing some of the metadata without actually capturing the direct communication. So there are a number of ways and opportunities for us to build that in. So certainly that is something we will continue to raise.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to our witnesses. Normally we would have gone for another few more minutes, but unfortunately the bells are ringing and that's probably going to take us another 30 minutes before we start. So we're going to suspend and we're going to test the second panelists while we're suspending. Then we'll come back to our second panelist session.
Continue with this panel after the, I mean, it's.
There's only 5, 10, yeah.
It's up to you.
7, 10,
'cause we're gonna run-
17 minutes.
So
18 minutes.
I'm going to suspend for now, though.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we only have till 1, right?
Madame Frances Hogan, Avocate, Social Platform Transparency and Accountability, who will get a phone call from the clerk or somebody from the room regarding interpretation. And we have Madame Miranda Jordan-Smith, Executive. And with us in the room in person, we have Coalition pour la Surveillance Internationale des Libertés Civiles, Mr. Tim McSorley, Coordinator, National Coordinator. Please wait, each of you, until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, please ensure that you have the switch on with the selected on the bottom of your screen, the language of your choice, because questions will be coming in both languages. I also ask that you wait to be asked to speak, whether you're a member or a witness, and that it goes through the chair. What I will now do is ask for 5 minutes, please, up to 5 minutes for Madame Miranda Jordan-Smith to please commence with up to 5 minutes.
Thank you for having me here today. As mentioned, my name is Miranda, and I'm here today to represent the astronomical and increasing number of victims that have been subjected to online harm. Please allow me to share with you the story of my daughter's abuse. At the age of 12, my daughter had a cell phone, which we ensured was equipped with parental controls. She was not on social media at all. Her screen time was limited, and her contacts needed to be approved. Her father could see all of the activity on her phone. Therefore, it was shocking to us to learn that our daughter at the age of 12 could be groomed and manipulated online on a school device which carried a music platform that did not have any age restrictions. It had a chat function like many, and it was not monitored adequately by the tech provider to detect the online predator she was speaking to. For 1 year, she was groomed by an online predator who presented as a peer. In June of 2022, at the age of 13, she was abducted by the predator, a 40-year-old man, right beside her school. When my daughter did not arrive home on the school bus, I reported her as missing. From there, a full-scale search for her ensued with a volunteer crews on the ground, knocking on doors and putting up posters. The police in Edmonton merged their historical crimes, missing persons, cybercrime, and human trafficking divisions in the hope our daughter would be found safe. For days, we had sleepless and tearful nights, wondering what happened to her. We engaged the media heavily, and our appeals made international news with the New York Post and the UK's Guardian. After a week of our daughter missing, I woke to officers at our door knowing that they had an update. Either they had found her alive or we knew our daughter would be returned to us in a body bag. Naturally, we were overjoyed to learn that our daughter was found. The FBI had seized her from a hotel room in Portland, Oregon, and she was being held at a children's hospital there where they administered a rape kit and an assessment of her abuse. Immediately, we jumped on a plane to retrieve her from Portland, and we brought her home. While the criminal case is still pending with a federal trial date set for January 13th of 2025, the abuse that my daughter suffered is unbearable to comprehend. Her perpetrator faces 70 to 77 years in prison for a litany of crimes, some of which include kidnapping, rape, sodomy, putting a child on display, possessing and developing child pornography, and crossing an international border with sexual intent. My daughter was stuffed into the perpetrator's trunk, and this act alone could have killed her. For the last 2 years, my family has been on a healing journey. The pain and the damage of these horrific events is complex and largely irreparable. We are learning to coexist with it. So today I appeal to you to understand the damage of an unregulated internet and what it creates. Tech companies need to be held accountable and ensure that they are acting in a legal and ethical manner. The online harms bill is a step in the right direction. While I know that some people feel regulation is an infringement on one's freedom of speech or privacy, I must tell you that my family has no privacy and no anonymity. Everyone knows who we are now, and we have to live with judgment or misconceptions around this could not happen to my child, or that our daughter is somehow gullible, or she comes from a poor socioeconomic background, all of which are not true. So I often think about regulation. To drive a car, one needs a license. To fish or hunt, one needs a license. To go into a porn shop and access pornographic material, one must produce identification. So why is the internet not regulated the same way, where users have to verify who they are? I think it's time for online reform in Canada, otherwise more children will become victims, and the impact is great for families and communities across the country. Already, the UK has progressive legislation, and Australia just passed regulation that social media users must be 16. So I appeal to you today as members of Parliament to make changes that will have a profound and lasting impact for the citizens of Canada, because it is my position and my lived experience that no child is safe on the web, and if this can happen to us, it could happen to anyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. McSorley, you have up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the committee for this invitation to speak to Bill C-63. I'm grateful to be here on behalf of the International Civil Liberties Monitoring Group, a coalition of 44 Canadian civil society organizations which works to defend civil liberties in the context of national security and anti-terrorism measures. The provisions of this bill, particularly in regards to Part 1, the Online Harms Act, are vastly improved over the government's original 2021 proposal, and we believe it will respond to urgent and important issues. However, there are still areas of serious concern that must be addressed, especially regarding undue restrictions on free expression and infringement on privacy. This includes, in Part 1 of the Act, first, the overly broad definition of the harm of content that incites violent extremism or terrorism will lead to over-moderation and censorship. Further, given the inclusion of the online harm of content that incites violence, it is redundant and unnecessary. Second, the definition of content that incites violence itself is overly broad and will lead to content advocating for protest to be made inaccessible on social media platforms. Third, the Act fails to prevent platforms from proactively monitoring, essentially surveilling, all content uploaded to their sites. Fourth, a lack of clarity in the definition of what is considered a regulated service could lead to platforms being required to break encryption tools that provide privacy and security online. Fifth, proposed requirements for platforms to retain certain kinds of data could lead to the unwarranted collection and retention of private information of social media users. And finally, seventh, there has been little consideration on how this law will inhibit the access of Canadians and people in Canada to content shared by people in other countries. Briefly, just on Part 2 of the Act, this section amends Canada's existing hate crime offences and creates a new standalone hate crime offence, and is only tangentially related to Part 1. It has raised serious concerns among human rights and civil liberties advocates in regard to the breadth of the offences and the associated penalties. We've called for Parts 2 and 3 to be split from Part 1 in order to be considered separately, and we're very pleased to see that the government's announcement yesterday that they intend to do just that. I'd be happy to speak to any of these questions, any of these issues during questions, and I've submitted a more detailed brief to the committee with specific amendments on these issues. However, I'd like to try to focus in the time I have on the first 2 points that I've made regarding content that incites violent extremism or terrorism, as well as a definition of content that incites violence. The harm of content that incites violent extremism or terrorism is problematic for 3 reasons and should be removed from the Act. First, it is redundant and unnecessary. The definition of content that incites violent extremism or terrorism and content that incites violence are nearly identical. The major difference being that the first includes a motivating factor for the violence it is attempting to prevent. These 2 forms of harms are also treated the same throughout the Online Harms Act, including requirements for platforms to retain information related to these harms for a year to aid in possible investigations. Moreover, and maybe most importantly, incitement to violence alone would clearly capture any incitement to violence that arises from terrorist or extremist content. Further definition of what motivates the incitement to violence is unnecessary. Second, if included, incitement to terrorism will result in the unjustified censorship of user content. Terrorism and with it extremism are subjective terms based on interpretation of the motivations for a certain act. The same opinion expressed in one context may be viewed as support for terrorism and therefore violent, while in another may be viewed as legitimate and legally protected political speech. Acts of dissent become stigmatized and criminalized, not because of the act itself, but the alleged motivation behind the act. As we have seen, this leads to unacceptable incidents of racial, religious, and political profiling in pursuit of fighting terrorism. Studies have also extensively documented how social media platforms already over-moderate content that express dissenting views under the auspices of removing, quote, terrorist content. The result is that by including terrorism as a motivating factor for posts that incite violence, the Act will be biased against language that is not in fact urging violence, but is seen as doing so because of personal or societal views of what is considered terrorism or extremism. I note also that extremism is not defined in Canadian law. And that ties into the third key part that we're concerned about, and that's that parts of the language used in this definition are undefined in Canadian law or the criminal code. 30 seconds? Okay, I'll finish up here. And this contradicts that the government's main justification for all 7 harms, that they align with the criminal code and do not expand existing offenses. There are several examples, but one I'll share is that the definition of incitement to terrorism, in fact, only includes actively encourages an act. There's no definition of what includes actively encourages. It's a much lower threshold than incitement, and in fact goes against what is already in the criminal code, which punishes either instructing or counseling a terrorist activity.
We'll get back to you with the questions. Now we have Madame Hogan for up to 5 minutes, please. You are on mute, Madame.
Okay. Hello, thank you for inviting me. I only was invited yesterday, so I'm unfortunately going to have to just listen to my stream of consciousness. But I wanted to address 3 main issues. The first regards what can be known and is unknown. You've probably heard lots of things in the media around what are the damages to kids, what are the risks. I thought the testimony regarding Miranda's child was incredibly compelling. There are many, many stories like this.
Microphone.
One of the things that
Please speak closer to your microphone. Apparently, they're not allowed they're not able to hear you well. Yeah.
Okay, 1 second. I can also increase the gain. Give me 2 seconds. Everything was fine on the audio check yesterday. How about that? Oh, is that any better? Okay, we can also try the headphones. Is that any better? Is that better quality? Or do you want the
Yeah, please continue.
Okay, good. I'm sorry, I was only invited yesterday and there was no way to get any of the headphones. None of the headphones on the approved list were available in Puerto Rico. What I was going to say was I wanted to, you can go and read all these horrific accounts of the impacts on kids. But the thing that I want to emphasize is what can be known and what cannot be known today, because there are lags in the impact of when we see these effects. We look at 16-year-olds today and we say, we know what the harms are of social media. But the 16-year-olds and the 17-year-olds today came online at 12 and 13.
Okay.
The first time I sat down.
Okay. I'm going to spend for a moment to try and figure something in the room. So panelists, just give me a moment, please.
I'm sorry. I was in the exact same setup on CNN 2 days ago, and it was fine.
I'll start with Ms. Jordan Smith. Thank you for your testimony today, and again, your courage and for speaking out on this issue. One of the things that struck me about your testimony was you talked about how your daughter was victimized through a platform that you weren't even aware she was using. One of the things that strikes me is that in order to have a duty of care that would address the fact that technology changes all the time, there's always going to be some new platform that kids are on, that we need to have a very clear but also broad definition of who or what a duty of care would apply to, that it can't just be, you know, Meta or a couple of the known players, right? So I've been giving some thought about what that could mean. And I tend towards a broader term. The term I would like to use is something like online operator, which would mean the owner or operator of a platform, such as a service, online, or application that connects to the internet or that is used or reasonably could be expected to be used by a minor, including social media service and online video gaming service. So that it's very clear that, you know, like as new platforms come up in the future, as technology changes, that you as a parent aren't having to guess whether or not your child is being exposed to a platform that might not be covered by the law. Would you support that type of a recommendation?
I mean, I would support it because I think it's the best way to capture it, and, you know, it would encapsulate all types of online activity, and I think that that is what is important.
In terms of, so now bridging from the who or the what to what they're responsible for, I'd like to suggest some, very briefly, some things that online platforms or operators should be responsible for. So preventing like a significant duty of care to prevent physical harm or incitement of such harm, including online bullying and harassment, online sexual violence against minor, including any conduct directed at a minor online, the creation or dissemination of imagery that is sexually exploitative, humiliates them, is harmful to their dignity, or invades their privacy, the promotion and marketing of products or services that are currently unlawful for minors, as well as patterns that indicate or encourage addiction-like behavior. Would you say that we're on the right track there with that sort of looking at that scope of things that would an online operator would have to ensure that minors were not subjected to?
I mean, I think minimally that would be ideal. A few additional thoughts of mine would be that they, again, have age restrictions, that there is a responsibility on tech companies to identify who their users should be. My daughter was on a platform that didn't have any age restrictions. So to me, that's completely irresponsible.
And I'm glad you brought this up because it was actually my next question. So it's a question between you and Mr. McSorley. So the government in C63 has not thought about age verification at all. They're punting this to a regulator that's not created, and it's going to be 2 or 3 years down the road. And witnesses in the other panel have suggested that age verification can be done right now through algorithms, and I agree with you. Like, I agree with that. You can detect someone's age using an algorithm. If Maida knows I want to buy a KitchenAid spatula, they know how old somebody is. Like, it's, right? So I'm wondering between the two of you, is the way that we should be squaring the circle on age verification to protect personal information while ensuring that minors are not subjected to harm is by requiring online operators to use algorithms or other technological means to determine age within a degree of accuracy. Does that make sense to you, Ms. Jordan-Smith?
I think so. I think that they need to determine an appropriate age for the users of their platform. And then I think verification to me seems like a normal thing that's even happening online, where some providers are already self-regulating. As an example, LinkedIn, in order to be verified, you have to upload your driver's license. For me to take a course at Oxford, I had to upload my passport for them to verify my identity and that I'm actually the person taking that course. So I don't see it as a huge
I'd just like to get to Mr. McSorley quickly on that. Does that seem like a way to square the circle?
I think it would be. One thing that we've raised in our brief, and I think others will raise, is that there's a lack of requirements for algorithmic transparency from social media platforms in the bill. And so if that was integrated, I think that would answer a lot of the concerns.
Now, do both of you think that this should be something that is put in a legislated duty of care as opposed to being punted off to a regulator where we parliamentarians would have no say, or you would have no say in what that looked like? Does that make sense to you, Mr. McSorley?
I'm not enough of an expert on where the technology is at right now to say whether or not it should be legislated or what the best approach would be.
What about you, Ms. Jordan-Smith? Would you like to see that requirement put forward in a legislated duty of care as quickly as possible, or would you like it to be punted to a regulator 2 or 3 years into the future at best?
My opinion is that something needs to happen now, and I see it as responsible to have rules and regulation around the internet. as I mentioned in my statement, having there's freedom, but then there's limits to freedom because we need law and order. So I don't see the issue with people having to verify who they are. And then where the criminal code is concerned, if there's a perpetrator out there on the web, if he had to verify who he was in order to get on that site, it would be easy for police to then enforce.
So thank you very much for that. I'm now going to go to Madame Dillon for up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and my questions will be for Mrs. Jordan Smith. Thank you so much for coming today and sharing your painful testimony. And we heard the painful testimony of the witnesses before as well. It's not easy to hear this, so I cannot even imagine what you and your family are going through and your child as well. My heart breaks to hear these things happening. And I would like to say that the 3 core duties of this bill would be to act responsibly, to protect children and remove child sex abuse material and nude images shared without consent, including deep fakes. Can you please speak to the importance of these duties in your spirit? What would you like to say?
I think that would be adequate. I can't think of anything else necessarily to add at this stage, but I think the sharing and the way that things live on the web, that needs to be stopped as well, because I know Carol and Barbie, who were in the first panel, that is part of the re-victimization of victims, is that these things are shared and reposted, and I think that there needs to be some language around preventing that from happening.
And do you think if this legislation had existed at the time your daughter was abducted, it would have made a difference in her life? Or you would not be facing this today?
I mean, I don't know to what extent we wouldn't be in the same position, but I certainly think that if tech companies were held responsible and actually moderated their site, that it would have been removed. So I think it could have been prevented by tech companies as well as by having the online safety component with a bill like C63.
And to follow up with that, we keep hearing about censorship. People who are alleging that this bill is a new form of censorship, and it suggests that there is currently freedom for online platforms, and that there is control over what you see. But these platforms are the ones that have the control. It's not the users. Do you believe users have freedom on these platforms currently? And what are your thoughts? And what would you like to see different?
I mean, I've heard the freedom of speech argument. My position on it, like I said, is, we like to think that we live in a society of free will, but within that, there are frameworks of law and order in our society, and there needs to be some measure of control. I'm an advocate for having rules in place. I don't see it as an infringement on censorship. I think that, if there's hate speech or hate crimes or racial slurs or extensive online bullying, those things, I mean, the police are doing their best to try to deal with, but I certainly think that it would give some teeth to police to be able to enforce something, and it would set, sort of the ground rules for Canada on how we operate on the web. So it would be a cultural shift.
And again, I have a follow-up to that comment. I was actually going to ask you about this. The harms online also include those that induce a child to harm themselves or subjects them to bullying. Why do you think it's important to include these as well in the bill?
I think it's important because the result is that children are dying and they're committing suicide through online bullying or exploitation or sextortion, and they're happening at an increasing rate. C3P put out a report that Snapchat and Instagram have the highest rates of predatory behavior, and I know children on those platforms, and people create content thinking it's innocent, but I think, oh, that's your child dancing at the age of 12, how cute, but I think that there's a predator watching that.
And we've seen, I don't know if you've been watching over the last few weeks, Justice Committee, in getting to this bill. Why is it urgent? And there's been filibusters that have taken place. where you talk about re-victimization and testimony of victims was read over and over again over hours and hours rather than addressing the bill. Why is it urgent to pass this bill in your opinion? What are we risking by delaying the passage of this bill even further and further?
For me, I think we're kind of behind the eight ball. Like I mentioned, the UK and Australia have more progressive legislation, so does the EU. And I'm not suggesting that those are necessarily perfect pieces of legislation, but there has to be something in place, and something is better than nothing. And I think it would give rules to how people operate on the web, especially even people that aren't doing, harmful behavior. But when I think about even grown women that I know that have received unsolicited nudes from grown men or catfishing and things like that, there are victims of all of these things. And it right now is the Wild West. And I think that there needs to be something in place that gives people the legal framework on how to operate within this space.
And we keep hearing mention of a regulator and over again in these questions. I would like to ask you and how you feel that knowing without a regulator, victims would have to sue social media platforms to enforce the law. What would you like to say about that?
Very briefly, please.
I would say that there should be, again, more in place. We are victims, and we are in the middle of a lawsuit with the provider of a platform. So,
you would like to see this passed quickly, Bill C-63?
Yeah.
Thank you
absolutely.
so much.
Thank you very much. Maintenant, la parole à Monsieur Fortin, s'il vous plaît, pour 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Mais d'abord, merci.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan Smith, for having been here with us today. What you're saying is very disturbing. We heard Ms. Todd and Ms. Lavers before you with a similar story. And we have in mind the situations that you've experienced, and we will be keeping them in mind all throughout our work on this important issue. Bill C-63 is addressing the problem of hate online, hate speech online, and the problem of image distribution and bullying, etc. And the minister announced that he would be splitting this bill, and so we could work more quickly on the issue of bullying and the use of social media networks by adopting the new Online Harms Act. That's good news for us. Were you was the idea of splitting the bill at C-63 mentioned to you, and what do you think about it, so we could work more quickly on online harms?
No, I don't see it.
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay, someone will have to give you a call.
Thank you.
Hey, Miranda, can you hear me?
Continue.
So we'll continue. Mr. Fortin, could you start again from the beginning?
Quand je parle en français, est-ce que vous avez l'interprétation?
Do you get the interpretation now? Can you hear the interpretation? Miss Jordan Smith, can you?
To now really be tight and on the minutes because we have to conclude at 1 o'clock. So, Monsieur Fortin, s'il vous plaît. On recommence.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Chair. So, Ms. Jordan Smith, can you hear me? Can you hear the interpreter? Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Je pense qu'elle ne m'entend pas.
No.
She said yes? I didn't hear her. Okay, alors, Madame Jordan Smith.
So, Ms. Jordan Smith, did somebody explain to you how the system worked before you started giving your evidence in order to get the interpretation?
My testing.
Elle dit qu'elle n'a pas d'interprétation.
No, she.
It's working?
Ça marche maintenant.
Do you understand me, Miss Jordan Smith? You are getting interpretation, right? Can you?
Okay. Est-ce que quelqu'un vous a expliqué comment?
Did someone explain to you how the system worked before you gave your evidence in order to get interpretation?
OK, mais je veux juste m'assurer qu'on vous a bien expliqué. Je vous blâme pas.
Make sure that it was explained to you. We have to explain to the witnesses how the interpretation works before, and it's important that all Canadians, those who speak French and those who speak English, can hear your evidence, and it's part of my role to ensure that everyone can understand you clearly because your evidence is important and needs to be understood by everyone. So that's why I asked you if it was how the system worked was explained to you. But that being said, I know it's not obvious the first time. So now I understand that you have the interpretation and you could hear me clearly. Yes or no? Yes. So I was saying earlier that I was thanking you for being here with us. So your evidence is really moving, as was Ms. Todd's and Ms. Lever earlier, and we are aware of the horrible things that your daughter was subjected to, and be sure that we keep that in mind when we're working on this issue on C-63. The reason I asked you what I was talking to you was C-63. The minister said that he was going to split the bill so we could work more quickly on both aspects, especially the online harms section, which is, to my mind, what's most urgent, which is about protecting our children. And I'd like to know what you think of the idea of splitting Bill 63 into the Online Harms Act, and then the other aspect would be the problems of hate online.
For easiest to administer. So if there's contentious components of Bill C-63, then I feel as though, I capitulate to government folks who know how things are administered to, extrapolate components of, the criminal code or, pieces that might be up for debate, and then create other pieces of legislation that might work better within the system. I guess that's all I can really say on that topic, but I don't see an issue with them being separated so long as they're effective and they work within the system.
Merci, Madame Jordan Smith.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan Smith. The bill wants to create 3 different bodies: the Canadian the Digital Safety Committee, the Canadian Ombudsman of Digital Safety, and the Digital Safety Office. Are you aware of these 3 bodies, of what their role is, and what do you think of them?
So I've read about it. I suppose, speaking candidly, I just look at it like that would be a function of government. So again, I sort of rely on what would actually work systemically. And those are components that I don't have the expertise in. I suppose my experience is more boots on the ground and a lived experience that was absolutely horrific. So I can just outline what the issues are in our cases that I've seen.
Merci.
I understand. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Jordan-Smith. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Time is going by. I don't know where I am. I don't have a lot of time left. I wanted to ask you, I think that what the action that would seem to be most urgent for you is the question of verifying the age of the users of social networks, social media. Am I wrong? And if I do, could you tell me what is the issue we should focus on at first?
Education seems like a natural given because I see it already happening. The other piece is, mandating that the providers or operators are actually monitoring these sites, because right now there's an issue with AI as well, where they're not detecting certain words that are sexually charged, not just, racial or violent terms, but in the case of my daughter, the stuff that we had found on the platform that she was attached to was still live up until a few months ago when our lawyer had it removed. And that AI monitoring, the age restriction and verification, I think those are key and fundamental to having some control over the internet.
Merci.
Thank you. How much time do I have left, Chair? 1 minute. So once that was said, the verifying age, Ms. Jordan-Smith, are there other aspects of this issue that we should focus on? For example, the producers of, or the makers of computers, phones, tablets, etc., could we not go further and recommend to them some kind of control mechanism on what can be played on those articles? And there's the issue of platforms that I haven't talked about yet, but is the hardware, is there anything that could be done there?
Response to that?
I'm not opposed to it. I wouldn't have an issue with it, but I think you're going to run into other Canadians that, again, say it's an infringement. I look at it like it's all focused around safety. So my perspective is that I have no problem with it, and I know other people that wouldn't.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. McPherson, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to welcome Mr. McSorley to the committee. I've had you as a witness at my other committee, the Public Safety Committee, and certainly we've really appreciated that. In your exchange with Ms. Rempel-Garner, the subject of algorithmic transparency came up, and that's a term that I'm familiar with and very much interested in, because when people are posting online on these platforms, the platforms are not just passive bystanders. Their algorithms can both amplify and suppress. Algorithms can be very useful. They can direct people towards their interests. They can help make searching much more efficient. But they can also push people down to some very dark corners. And I think certainly over the last number of years, we have seen the real world results of that. My colleague Peter Julian has come up with a bill, Bill C-292. I'm sure there are a variety of different ways of approaching this, but just in terms of taking a more active role in promoting algorithmic transparency, how do you figure that fits into this subject matter that we're discussing today?
Thanks so much for that question, and I think it is very important, and also important because, excuse me, as we address different forms of harms, we need to look at modeling different approaches. And that's why, in our comments, we're not proposing changes in terms of addressing child sexual abuse material or other things, but focusing specifically around national security and anti-terrorism concerns. That said, in terms of algorithmic transparency, we think that would be important to overall have a mandate for these platforms to have to be as open about the development of their algorithms, what kind of information is being fed into them. And as we've argued in other places around the current Artificial Intelligence and Data Act, that there needs to be third-party assessments to ensure that these algorithms are doing their job, both in ensuring that they're efficient in what they're being asked to do, but also to ensure that there aren't negative repercussions, because we know that already with the use of artificial intelligence and algorithms that there has been documented cases of bias around age, around gender, around race. And so it's important that there's an openness, and that's something that's missing from Bill C-63.
Thank you. In your opening statement, I think we're talking about how anything posted on social media could in one context be viewed as inciting terrorist violence, but in another context it could be viewed as perfectly acceptable speech. So can you elaborate on this and maybe provide an example?
Sure, definitely. I think there's a few areas we could look at that. We could look at that domestically, where individuals marching in the street for one cause, and we've been active on raising concerns about the characterization of any support for Palestinian human rights as being in support for terrorism. And so, but a march for another issue that unfurls in the exact same way as the exact same call for an action would not be characterized that way. We think of the Occupy movement. And so there's a concern that even though there's no direct call for violence, that because of the stigma of simply labeling something as potentially being in support of terrorism, that it could be viewed as a harm. And I'd like to expand that too, because one of our concerns is how this will be applied internationally. There are countries that would say that human rights defenders in Egypt or people resisting in Ukraine, other countries define them as terrorists. And so then how would the platforms be expected to decide how to monitor all that? Whereas if it was limited simply to incitement to violence, without that, subjective decision-making around it, it would be a lot more clear for the platforms, be clearer for the audience, and it'll also be easier to challenge it when it comes to the Digital Safety Commission if there are any issues.
In other words, legislators, we need to very much pay attention to the subjective interpretations of the laws that we are proposing. Very well taken. We've also had a lot of conversations about how we want platforms to take more responsibility for the content. But do you have concerns at all about platforms proactively monitoring all content and just how they would deal with the collection and retention of private information? Can you elaborate on those concepts for the committee?
Thanks. Yeah. Well, one of the concerns we had with the original iteration of this bill was that it would actually have mandated platforms to have to, in fact, monitor essentially all content that was going up. It no longer does that, but we're concerned that it doesn't stop them from doing that. It doesn't block that. And the reason for that is that if that were the case and they were to do that, they would by default have to rely almost primarily on algorithmic decision-making. And that's not included, as we said, the transparency is included in the bill. And it would almost by default result in an over-moderation. They would have to lean towards taking down content and dealing with it later, rather than actually narrowly defining it. In some cases, for child sexual abuse material, there's hashes and things that can be used to specifically identify particular types of content, and that would avoid having to monitor all online content. But that's missing from this bill in terms of an obligation for the platform to not engage in that activity.
McGregor. Just for the interest of, we still have a little bit of time, I'm going to shorten the time frame. Alors, je veux donc 3 minutes, 1 minute.
So 3 minutes, 3 minutes, a minute and a half, and a minute and a half. Ms. Rempel-Garner, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
I'm going to go back to you, Ms. Jordan-Smith, and pick up on a line of questions from my colleague, Mr. Fortin. So he had asked you if you knew what the regulators did. And I think you gave a very succinct answer. You said, that would be up to the government. It's concerning to me, though, that you don't know what it does. And I'm not saying that pejoratively. I'm saying it from the perspective of, as a parent who's gone through so much loss, I feel that the stated goal of C-63 is for you to know what protections you have upon its passage, but they don't actually exist because all it does is create a regulator where there's no guarantee that the protections that you're asking for are going to be legislated by Parliament. So in that, my preference would be that Parliament legislates that duty of care immediately so that either law enforcement or existing regulatory bodies could take action immediately. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think it needs to happen. Because right now we have nothing.
Exactly. And to me, like, there is a part of C63 in Section 4 where it talks about enhancing reporting requirements. And some of my colleagues have suggested that we need a regulator to do that. But in the bill itself, it says that these reporting requirements would go to a law enforcement body, which already exist. Would you support, those provisions, which are enhancing laws that already exist and that would go through a law enforcement? Is that perhaps what the government should be focusing on, while also ensuring that there's a legislative duty of care, so that if one of us asked you that question again, do you know what this law does or what protections you're afforded, you'd be able to answer that with a degree of certainty that brought you some peace in your heart?
Well, just to clarify, like what I said is I don't know how it would be administered. So I'm not ignorant to the bill, but I feel as though there has to be something in place that guides the citizens of Canada on how to engage with the internet,
yes,
as well as providers. So that's where I feel like the bill is strong. When we talk about how it's levied out, or if there's ombudsman or different regulating bodies, like that's the piece that I'm just full admission, I don't know how that would function, so that could be a weakness.
So with my last 30 seconds, I want to thank you for all your work on this, and I'd like to follow up with you after this meeting, and I would like to send you a copy of Bill C-412, which actually specifies that in great certainty. It's a bill before Parliament that we could pass today and actually get these protections for some certainty for parents like you, and I think that's what we all want to do here. We don't want to wait another 2 or 3 years.
Thank you very much. Now, for the 3 minutes, I'm going to go to Madame Brière, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask a question to Madame Liana, if she's still online. Is she? Madame Todd? Okay. Yeah. So, Madame Todd, I would like to hear from you why the argument that this is an unnecessary bureaucracy is unfounded.
What do you mean by the unnecessary bureaucracy?
We heard about the regulator a lot. Pretty about it.
Well, I've been following what's been happening in Australia, and I've actually met the e-commissioner in Australia that does the regulatory administration. And for all those who might not know, there was a question about what are the parts of a prospective e-commissioner, and it would Digital Safety Commission of Canada. It would be a body that would oversee the enforcement of the Online Harms Act, a digital safety ombudsman. That role would support users and advocate for the public interest of online safety, and the duties for social media operators platforms will be required to implement measures to mitigate, protect children, and make harmful content inaccessible. And so what it is it's a whole ball with different parts in the ball. And so that's sort of what's needed. And it's not going to happen overnight, because in Australia, it took years to come up with. And we're doing this for long-term safety. We're not doing this for short-term. We want to do it right. And so everything that we do takes time and takes time and care, really. And what I'm not happy about is that we see, as parents, we are being asked questions that we might not know about, because what we've come here to talk about is why the importance of Bill C-63 is important to enact. And so this is one of the last first world countries to enact something like this, and that's why we need to have it done. We do need the regulatory board, and the E-Commission is a regulatory board. That's what I have to say about that one.
Thank you. And I know the question has been asked to someone else, but do you think that your daughter may still be alive today, had C-63 been law at the time?
Well, there's lots of moving parts with that, with the mental health aspect. But remembering back in the days when the intimate images were posted on Facebook and through sites, I remember chasing down Facebook and trying to figure out where to report it, and I couldn't. There was no button back then. There was no email address. There was no phone number to contact. And as I saw my child realize this and saw her disintegrate before my eyes, it was heartbreaking. And so we're 12 years past this, and there is still things that are happening that are harmful to children and families that need to be changed. And technology has advanced so much that it makes it more challenging, more difficult. If we were back 12 years ago, I'm sure that, regulators, we could have fixed these problems, but they're just so with AI, with the advancement of artificial intelligence now.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you. And now I'm going to go to 1 minute et demi pour Monsieur Fortin, and then followed by 1
A minute and a half for Mr. Fortin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Chair. So in a minute and a half, I'll go quickly. First of all, thank you, Ms. Jordan-Smith. Thank you, Mr. McSorley. Even though I didn't ask you any questions, it's not that your presence isn't important. Your evidence was very clear. I noted it. Ms. Jordan-Smith, I have one final question for you. We're all hoping that the Online Harms Act will be adopted very soon. C63 is proposing this. To my mind, there may be some adjustments to be brought, but I think we have to be diligent. But that being said, it won't solve all problems. It criminalizes certain behaviors. It creates bodies for complaints and follow-up. But the question I have for you is, in your opinion, would it not be helpful if sums of money were devoted to awareness campaigns on radio, TV, or social media? So raising awareness that could reach our young men, young women, to equip them in these situations. They'll constantly being faced with those situations regardless of the laws we adopt. So would an awareness campaign in the media change something for victims? Thank you.
I mean, certainly it could help, but C3P already did an awareness campaign around the bill, and that has been shared and on TV throughout the summer. So my feeling is that adults, like, we're of the digital era, and adults actually don't necessarily use social media appropriately. So.
See, Mr. McGregor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. McSorley, I'll turn to you again. With respect to encryption tools, that are designed to protect online security and privacy, do you believe that anything in C63 poses a risk to those? And do you have any ideas on, if you do have concerns on what we as a committee should be looking at in terms of addressing those concerns?
I know that the question around encryption and private messaging is a live one in terms of how to approach it in this bill. Our concern is that once encryption is broken in private messaging, it can't be fixed. Once one actor is able to access encrypted information, it's possible that it will be able to be accessed for other reasons. And encryption really underlies so much of the security that we have online, from banking to even protecting the privacy of people of all ages. And in the bill right now, there's no requirement explicitly that platforms have to protect encryption. And so we're concerned that the lack of any acknowledgement of that could lead to platforms interpreting the bill as allowing them to do so. And so we think that further protection should be included in the bill.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the panelists that appeared with us, and thank you for those that appeared in the first panel for bearing with us. Sometimes it happens when we have to suspend like that abruptly without knowing in advance, but your persistence in staying with us is very much appreciated. And I speak on behalf of all the committee. We are very appreciative for your testimony, and very, very, our hearts are with you, whether you've encountered this 12 years ago or whether it was last year, it's still like as of yesterday. So for all the parents that are with us, thank you so much for sharing your personal stories and for continuing to share them so that we don't forget and we do move as quickly as we can as legislators with a bill like this. So thank you very much. And the only one last comment I would make, if there was anything you wished to say that you felt you did not have an appropriate time to say that, we would welcome anything you would like to send us in writing. I know all of you have sent briefs already, so it's not necessary. But if there's anything that you feel that you wish for us to further consider, please, through the clerk, send it to our committee. Alors, thank you so much. And right now, is it the will of the committee that we adjourn? Yes, thank you so much. Meeting adjourned.